Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. Live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
Good day, good night, and welcome to Soccer Today for Wednesday, August 28th, 2019. I'm Kevin Laramee, joined by Duane Rollins as always. Today, busy show. We'll talk about Fraser being hired by the Colorado Rapids a couple of days ago. We'll also talk about the U.S. Open Cup final last night. Midweek preview. There's some games tonight in Major League Soccer. A Canadian kind of derby later tonight as well. But to start the show, Duane, today we do have an update on what we talked about yesterday on our Soccer Today show. Bury and Bolton, two different, I would say, results yesterday. Bury FC is no more after 134 years in the Football League. It has been expelled yesterday.
Yeah, it's quite unfortunate. The first time it's happened since 1992, as we outlined on the show. It is terrible. I mean, I think in the days ahead we'll continue to follow this from the revitalization standpoint, because I think that's as important as the death is the rebirth, and I do believe that there will be a rebirth of Bury, that they will get the team back from. Well, they won't have it for this year because they just can't, but I suspect that they will have everything ready to go for a Phoenix club next year. And look, as I said yesterday, just because it's a Phoenix club and it technically isn't the same club, to me, that's, balderdash. That's just symbolism. It's the same club. It's just starting at a lower level again.
If it looks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, and if it walks like a duck, there's a good chance that it's a duck. Hopefully we see a duck in Bury. But the other unfortunate aspect, since yesterday now, it looks like the club will go into liquidation, which is the selling off of the assets of the club, which does include the stadium. Hopefully there's a positive end here, and the stadium does not become just part of a new land to build condos or something. And there's been some cries. I was watching Sky News and BBC last night, and the Bury Football Club is in the Greater Manchester area. It's 15 miles away from Old Trafford and the Etihad, pretty much. So there was some cries from fans from Bury and from out there that one of the two biggest clubs in the world could have done something more to help this club. But it's a situation that, if you are a Manchester City, a Manchester United, and I don't want to dwell on this, I'm just mentioning because it was something that was talked about on television last night. If you are one of those big clubs, you cannot necessarily start by helping every single club who's going to start to become in risk of being expelled from the league. It'll never stop. But yeah, there was a lot of disappointed fans. And it is a grief. It is a bereavement. And that's how fans were feeling. I was looking at this interview from a gentleman who got engaged last year when his team got promoted to League One. He got engaged in the stadium in the supporters section, and now he's all distraught, and I can understand that.
Yeah, look, we won't belabor it any further than this. I will say this: I empathize with them, and I do understand the instinct to say, why couldn't City or United have done something more? And as I'm looking at this, the snowbirds just took off from the Toronto airport. That's interesting. Anyway, there you go. I understand that instinct, but it's as you say, like, does Walmart buy up every small town store that it's run out of business? There's a bit of problem. It doesn't, right?
Walmart lets them close down, and they just pick up the customers after, which I guess maybe a Wimbledon, a Forest Green, or another club in the nearby region is about to do. Maybe they'll have an influx of fans, but it doesn't work like that. And it is interesting. But Bolton, let's talk about the more positive, I would say, scenario since yesterday. Bolton was given a fortnight. They were giving 14 days to finalize the takeover by the Fortress Venture, something similar. The new ownership group that would take over Bolton. And the Bolton story, we didn't even talk about this, but they drew with the League One champions a couple of weeks ago, actually against the championship team a couple of weeks ago, playing kids only, a 17-year-old average, and the kids of Bolton have been playing. Some of the games have been postponed for Bolton in League One, but there's some games they have played. They just played Ipswich, and they lost 5-1. But Bolton is playing with kids, 16, 17-year-old on average. Is it viable for a whole season? We do wish the best for Bolton now. 14 more days for them to find a solution, money, new owner, or to just finalize the takeover.
Yeah, and well, as you say, they've been playing because they really can't put players on contract, so they've been playing with their youth team, and they have a points deduction as well. So it's really a case, the League One table. There's only really going to be one team relegated from it this year. They basically one team they're competing to relegate because Bolton is in a hole already and playing with kids all year. Bury has been kicked out, and so then the rest of the teams, whoever finishes last amongst them, will be the other team to join those two to go down with three coming up to replace it. It's unfortunate. We hope Bolton does get it done. You'd hate to see two go down at the same time. You also hope that maybe this is a kick in the pants of the EFL and of everyone involved in the game in England and around the world, because we have seen other clubs do this where there are protections put in place to prevent one bad owner from completely destroying a team. I can't understand.
Oh no,
I'm North American, Kevin. I can't get over the fact, why can't the league just run it for a year or something where you find ownership? I don't completely get it, but anyway.
I guess it has something to do with the amount of clubs there is. If you do it one, you have to do it everyone. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of clubs in England. But I do feel that maybe down the road we have to look, like when it becomes quiet in the off season of MLS and the few weeks where we don't have a lot of soccer to talk about, or sometimes during an international break over the next few weeks.
When is that exactly? International break, there you go.
During an international break where both Canada and the United States are not playing significant games, I think it will be important to look at how the Bundesliga structures their club financially and the business aspect of a Bundesliga team, because something like we're seeing in Bury and in Bolton would never happen in Germany. The club, it's not like an owner. It's a club to the pure sense, and a community-based club, community-based ownership. But of course, there's someone paying for it. But there's more, I would say, contingency plans in case something like Bury or Bolton happens. In case an owner like Stephen Dale comes in, pays it for $1 and tries to sell it, and decides to be too greedy and doesn't find an agreement, and then it just unravels, and the club is no more. I think the Bundesliga does it the best, but that's something for a future show, something we need to do some research on, and to truly find how the Bundesliga, the teams in there, and throughout the 3 and 4 divisions of the Bundesliga, how the teams are financially put together versus teams in England versus MLS too. Eventually, we should compare this. This is a good topic for a slow day, but the slow day is not today. The Colorado Rapids have hired Robin Fraser a couple of days ago. Former TFC assistant, former Chivas USA head coach, 2011-2012. That's a long time ago. But Robin Fraser, the new manager, not with an interim tag, this time is the real one for Colorado, and former TFC assistant, now head coach of the Rapids, Robin Fraser.
And for those that are interested in such things, a black American coach for the first time in a long, long time, since basically he left, which is significant on its own accord. But putting that aside for a second, Robert Fraser has long been linked to jobs within Major League Soccer. He has been in a lot of interviews. He stayed at TFC much longer than most people anticipated. I listened to his interview on Extra Time yesterday. You can go back and listen to that yourself if you like. He talked about how Colorado has always felt like home to him. He played professionally there in his own playing career, going way back when. He is going back now to be, to lead that team where he thinks is a nice young team that he can bring together. He's clearly understanding, if you listen to the interview, that there's not much going to happen for the rest of this year. This will be table setting. This will be setting things up to figure out what he needs moving forward. Colorado's season is pretty much done. He does get a return back to Toronto in the near future, too. That'll be interesting to see whether he can play spoilers for his former club there at BMO Field in a few weeks' time. in the stretch run, and in what will most likely be a very must-win for TFC at the time. So there's a little bit of a test for him there. He also indicated that playing style while, if you remember him with Chivas, he played a very methodical kind of defensive style. That was partly to do with Chivas' talent level, I suspect. He's sort of said that he's learned a lot and has evolved a lot in terms of his offensive thinking since then, and don't expect Colorado to emulate the same thing that Chivas USA did.
Well, hopefully, because if so, it would just be just the same thing, different year for the Colorado Rapids, if that would be the case. But in his time with the New York Red Bulls as an assistant, 2013-2014, he did learn as well a lot there, working under Mike Betke at that point, but also with players like Thierry Henry, who became and is, of course, legend in the sport, but has a lot of theory and way to think about this game. So that would be interesting. For me, Robin Fraser is a good hire. I am worried that it's a coach that was been there before, but like you mentioned, it's a long time ago. Chivas USA 2011 and 2012, those 2 seasons are a long time ago. The league and the coach himself, as Robin Fraser, changed a lot. He's seen the turnaround in Toronto. He was firsthand there. He was there for the first year of Jermaine Defoe in 2015 as an assistant, up until the Javinko era, the bloody big deal number 1, who was a failure. He was there for the bloody big deal number 2, who was the building blocks of the 2 very successful season and the CONCACAF run for the Toronto FC. He does have experience seeing a team being turned around with a lot of budget, but there's some ideology, some experience level that you can take out of that experiment of building Toronto and replicate it to a different scale with not the same budget, but at least the same thinking, or in the thought process could be at least tried with the Colorado Rapids. And we'll see if Robin Fraser is able to turn around this franchise, which Anthony Hudson wasn't able to, and another Oscar Pereira wasn't able to, and a lot of other coaches weren't able to in Colorado this time around. Mastroianni wasn't able to. He was close. He had that one good season. They made it to the playoff and that great, beautiful mustache, but at the end of the day, it wasn't enough. Hopefully, Robin Fraser is a change for the Colorado Rapids.
Yeah, Colorado was one game away from hosting MLS Cup. We forget, but nonetheless,
that's true. They were. What was it? 2015? No, 2016. I think it was 2016.
When the Seattle TFC first part 1. Had Seattle not won that game, the game would have been at Colorado, not Toronto. But Robin Fraser also spoke in the interview that I alluded to a minute ago about how he learned about what is needed for DP acquisition. I asked him directly about DPs, but I suspect you can also equate that to TAM players that you bring in, and that might be more Colorado's level at this point, is to make good purchases on the TAM level, and how you have to do the right sort of background checks and things like that. And I suspect that if you read between the lines from a Toronto perspective, you can kind of find the players that might not have met those background checks, dating back to Defoe, and how it's important to get those right. And Catchy and players like that that failed on the TAM level as well. So he's got a lot going on. Yeah.
No, it's true. Sorry for the last take there. But no, so hopefully Robin Fraser brings a new mentality in Colorado, because let's be honest here, it is desperately needed in Colorado, a new mentality regarding of the Rapids. And I think it will bring some new energy, hopefully to this city too. Well, for the soccer part of the city, because they desperately need it. Now let's continue, Duane. We've talked about Robin Fraser, and we've talked about Bolton and Bury. Last night, U.S. Open Cup, we have a champion, Atlanta United, winning their second trophy in just a few weeks after winning the Campeones Cup. This time around, Atlanta wins the U.S. Open Cup. Can you believe it, Duane? Frank de Boer has more trophies. Has more trophies than Tata Martino. But Tata Martino has the good one.
Yeah, saying he's won 2 trophies is kind of like Jose Mourinho pretending that he had won a treble the year that United won the Community Shield. Come on now.
It's exactly the same thing, though. You're right. It's literally, the Community Shield is literally the Campeones Cup. Just instead of a cup, put a plate, and that's the exact same competition, pretty much.
Yes, exactly. It's much easier to make a fake one that you pass around in the bar. You just put tinfoil over a plate. Anyway, not that I've done that before. I've done that before.
You have done that before, like what, last week? No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, I can see you be like,
now.
Yeah, exactly.
Few times now. No, look, this is the first big trophy of the year given out Major League Soccer. The U.S. Open Cup, I think, is definitely the third most important trophy for American teams in Major League Soccer. I think we can agree with that. It's on par in my mind with the Voyageurs Cup in terms of importance. Just obviously different teams competing for it. I know some Americans might get their back up on that, but the Voyageurs Cup is very difficult to win, and it is the equivalent. So yes, it is important. And it was nice to see a very big crowd in Atlanta. It was an entertaining game. 2 quick goals by Atlanta to start it. Including a freak own goal in the first goal, but kind of put Minnesota behind the bar, but really.
Exactly, and then Pity Martinez getting the second goal, 2 goals in 15 minutes for Atlanta. The atmosphere was great, but Minnesota did have their chances, and Ike Opara had the equalizing goal close to his right foot at the 90th minute and skied it, and at that moment I knew it was going to be over. But 2-1 for Atlanta. This run of form for Atlanta in the last month just shows that the talent they had was always going to rise to the surface, right? Because it doesn't matter technically, and the new coach and the relationship with players, and some of them that might have been strained already. At the end of the day, winning helps everything. And once you start winning, and maybe the way the coach asks you to play, you have a bit more trust over the coach, because you're like, okay, well, I didn't believe in him. His theories and his ideas seemed foreign to me, but I tried it and I was successful. So then I'll listen to him again. And then it's the opposite of a vicious cycle. It's an amazing cycle because positivity creates more confidence, and confidence on your coach creates a better awareness of the tactics, which creates as well a trust and a will, a mentality to run through a wall for your coach, because everything he tells me works and he makes me a better player. That will continues to create success, confidence, and you progress and you become a better team week in, week out. Atlanta is going to be hard to beat if they continue in that run.
Yeah, no, we've been saying it for a few weeks now that Atlanta to us is. I know that if you listen to other podcasts, there's been an ongoing debate about who the second best team in Major League Soccer is this year, and I don't think it's debatable. I think it's clearly Atlanta, based on the form that they've had, based on the fact that they, say what you want about the Campeones Cup, it was a good opponent that was trying on the night, so they did get a win there in difficult circumstances at home, but still against a very good team, and then obviously to get the job done in the U.S. Open Cup, playing a rival in the semifinal, and then a very desperate, Minnesota team that would have, badly wanted to do something for a fan base that has been very loyal to them for a while. And regardless of that, they were able to get the 2 results in those 2 games and win the U.S. Open Cup, showing that they have the ability to step up on the big game. We saw it last year in the playoffs. I mean, the first year they were in the playoffs, they went out to Columbus quickly. They learned from that, and they adjusted their tactics and know how to play knockout football. And that is an important consideration when you're handicapping the MLS Cup playoffs. We've looked at LAFC, if we want to take this to the extreme, and this is a bit of a stretch, I'll appreciate, but we look at LAFC in their games against Galaxy and how they have struggled to beat them, and that is a game that is circled on the calendar and is a game you're supposed to rise up and get. And we saw the reaction at final whistle when LAFC again failed to beat Galaxy.
They were booed.
Traffic. Yeah, and the players dropped to their knees, and they were very upset. And that's a knockout game, and whether you can draw a direct, connect the dots, I don't think you can directly, but maybe you can with one little jig, right?
Maybe there is at least a somewhat indication that when the goings get tough, you don't have a point of reference of this team going through. Example, LAFC versus the Galaxy. If it works in the playoff, that's what I mean by going gets tough. Can LAFC overcome once again if the same scenario happens, which we have seen before, either LAFC taking an advantage and the Galaxy coming back to tie it or win after, or the other way around, the Galaxy taking a lead and LAFC having to fight back for the equalizer, and then can they get the winner? We've seen both scenarios over the last 2 years, and it's true. If it happens in the playoff, if the Galaxy goes up 3-0, what reaction do we see from LAFC? That's fascinating. And if it happens against Atlanta or exactly. So that would be great. But congratulations to Atlanta, winner of the U.S. Open Cup, the Lamar Hunt U.S. Open Cup last night in Hotlanta, A-Town. Yeah. All right. But the Voyageurs Cup as well is going to be in September, the final on the 18th and 25th. And Duane and I both love the cup competitions, of course, and we're going to look forward. And what could we do in the future? This year, Duane, it was the first time in 4 years that the U.S. Open Cup final was not televised on regular television. It was on ESPN.com and ESPN Go and ESPN Plus, pretty much. But what's the future of both? We say this every year. What's the future of both competitions? But is there anything what should? Is it important? Can it just stay niche the way it is, and does it really matter?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think you could make some tweets. Look, I don't get worked up to the idea that there aren't sellout crowds in every round of either competition. I think the beauty of both competitions is it allows, in the Voyageurs Cup case, starting this year, an increased field and hopefully in the near future, in a more open field. It's close to an open field now, and realistically, the only thing you could make an argument from up here is the PDL teams maybe deserve to win. But other than that, it's a pretty open field right now. With the League One appeals, 2 teams coming in. But back to the the U.S. Open Cup. Really, the only thing you could do in my mind is eliminate the bidding process for hosting the games and have those games hosted on either a random basis or, as we see with the French Cup, which a lot of people are advocating for now, where the lower seeded team always hosts, provided that the venue is appropriate, and that just makes it an additional wrinkle in the competition that makes it a little more difficult for the bigger teams, and it sort of grows the game.
It makes it romantic, though, because it makes the one trip a year, of example, the PSG to somewhere in the suburbs of France, and you have that travel, you have that great day, that great away day, or great home day if you are the lower seed team at home. And it does make for a romantic type of situation where you have the smaller stadium, the everything we loved about the thing here. It's the same. When I went to Blainville to see York 9 coming to town to play, or horses jump, that's the feeling I had. That's the magic of the cup, I guess.
Yeah, Canada gets that in the sense that we have the two-legged ties, and I don't know whether that's going to be forever that lasts. I suspect that when it opens up, that one of the sacrifices might be that the MLS teams ask for is that they go to a single knockout. But it is romantic, and I think that's one tweak you could definitely do. It would seem a little fair. One thing that I don't like is you get to bid to host the final. I would prefer that be earned in some way or random.
Duane,
or neutral.
We're neutral, sure. Okay. In Canada, we do have a Canadian National Soccer Stadium. If people don't know, it's called BMO Field. It's literally, BMO Field is not the name of the stadium. It's the naming rights by the company. The real name of the stadium is the Canadian National Soccer Stadium. So, that being said, should it be treated like Wembley for Canada? Should we have a game there? The final should always be there. It doesn't matter what. Or because the amount of teams is not big enough and because there's a pro team playing there as their home stadium, maybe that idea is not great. But maybe we can find, maybe Ottawa, the nation's capital, maybe we can have the final there. Maybe because it does make it special, right? That small team from, example, the championship, Reading a few years ago, or Wigan, made it to the final of the FA Cup, and the travel to Wembley, it always feels special. And the fans, we're going to Wembley, we're going to Canadian National Soccer Stadium. Or maybe in the US, if you have it, I don't know, we'll say Cowboy Stadium with 100,000 people, 80,000 empty seats probably. But just saying, should that be an idea, or am I just defeating the purpose of having an home field advantage on a one-off game?
I'm just going to point out before I continue this answer that it was the guy from Montreal that suggested that Toronto should play the
No. Not necessarily Toronto itself, but just the idea of having a neutral, special place to play a final.
Yeah, in theory, I like it. This country, the political reality, the sort of regionalism of Canada would make that very difficult. We see it with the Canadian national team when they book games for very pragmatic reasons and to BMO usually, how much the rest of the country reacts to that. And I guess the biggest difference in both Canada and the United States compared to the UK, or not the UK, I should say England, where you mentioned before, is that I can't just jump on a train and do a day trip to Wembley from Saskatoon. And I do get that. But I could, the other thing, though, you have three big stadiums, Saputo, BMO, and BC Place. You could rotate it between the three and just have hosting rights that way or something like that. And the same with the States. You could have a, West Coast, Central, East Coast, West Coast, Central, East Coast type rotation to make it fair. But realistically, I think in both cases, the Voyageurs Cup and the U.S. Open Cup, the casual interest is nowhere near, and by that I mean non-existent for the most part, right. To allow for neutral selling. I would just still rather, I'd put that out as an option. That's more of a long-term thinking, but realistically, I would just like it to either, as I say, be random, like you see in the FA Cup draw in England, or it be earned. So there's either it's set up so that it's always the lower seed, which is fine, or it's earned in the sense that if it's two MLS teams playing, whoever finished higher the year before would get to host or something like that. So there's some kind of competitive reason for it being there. It would just seem fairer to me, and I think it would grow the game a little bit more. It's more to the point, though, I like the idea of the smaller towns hosting because I think that creates the romance and creates the interest at that casual level that doesn't exist right now.
Quickly, we're going to try to finish the show in the next few minutes because time is running away from us, which has been our theme lately. Because the world of soccer is crazy and there's things happening like every morning I wake up and there's more things happening, which I guess is the reality for the rest of my life. But two things before we say goodbye for today. We do have a game in tonight, Montreal. The Montreal Impact are facing their Canadian rivals. If you notice my tone, I didn't say it the same way that I said it last week. But it is a rival. Sure. Vancouver Whitecaps are in town with former Montreal Impact head coach Marc Dos Santos coaching the Whitecaps' first trip to Montreal as a head coach for another team in Major League Soccer. For Marc Dos Santos tonight, the Montreal Impact will face the Vancouver Whitecaps at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 4:30 Pacific at Stade Saputo. But Marco Carducci, former goalkeeper product of Vancouver Whitecaps Academy, now playing for Cavalry FC of the Canadian Premier League, is the first player in the history of the Canadian Premier League, first active roster player to be selected by the Canadian men's national team for a first team duty. He has been selected for the CONCACAF Nations League roster for the game September 7th at BMO Field versus Cuba.
Yeah, and I think it's good to the league that it indicates that John Herdman is paying attention to what's happening down there. I would hope that we might see in the future, as the league establishes itself more, that there'll be more risks taken with younger CAMPL players to have them brought into camp, to expose them, in some cases to cap tie them if that is required, because it's recalled that these Nations League games are qualifiers for the World Cup or Gold Cup, depending on the cycle, so they will cap tie players if you put them in. So I think there's a useful purpose there. So I hope that we see more of it in the future, but this is, I think, a great little reward for what has been, most people, although I think there's some other keepers might argue, but Carducci has been consistently the keeper most noted as the best in the league right now. So that it's a good little reward for him to grab, for sure. Kevin, to go back to do we have a name for the Montreal-Vancouver rivalry, or is it just the
Je me souviens? It's the Je me souviens derby. The I remember derby.
That works.
That works, right?
There you go. Yeah, there used to be for those who don't know, there used to be a legit rivalry between the Impact and Whitecaps because they were the only two Canadian teams at the NASL, USL level for a while. So there used to be quite a rivalry there, but it hasn't been in a while.
Back when the Whitecaps were playing at Swangard and the Impact were playing at Saint-Claude Robillard, and you would have like Martin Nash of the Whitecaps come to town and play. That's the time period where Mauro Biello and even Nick DeSantis were players at that time for the Montreal Impact, and later on with the Patrick Leduc and Emilio Pizzolito, and that's the time frame, of course. But now it's the Je me souviens and the Asun Kamara and the 6-0 and all those great memories, mostly on the Impact side versus Vancouver over the years. since 2012, since joining Major League Soccer, especially in the Canadian Championship. 2013 and the 83rd minute goal by Asun Kamara on a bicycle kick off a corner to give Montreal the Canadian Championship. In 2013, the first of two in a row that led to Montreal being in the CONCACAF Champions League final in 2015, for me is my greatest Montreal impact and Vancouver Whitecaps memory. And it has nothing to do with a regular league play, but this is a regular game. And if Montreal does not win, I think Montreal's in a position where they won't make the playoffs. Tonight, it's all about tonight. Saturday was a bonus. But tonight, they don't win at home against Vancouver, they're not making the playoffs. Not only that, Wilmer Cabrera is not coming back. A lot of players won't. And it's a changing of the guard for the Impact. It's all about tonight.
No, fair enough. I was going to, Kevin, earlier today I did a little math, hashtag math. Montreal, it's time for your magic and tragic number time of year, right? And Montreal, if they were to lose tonight, their tragic number, which means the combined points between them and the team that they are chasing, in this case Toronto FC, which is the closest team to the playoffs to them, would be 13. So any combined total of 13 points gained or lost by Montreal or gained by Toronto would eliminate the Impact from that. And that's getting down into precarious territory at that point. You're looking at 2 wins and 2 losses, right?
And you're looking at not a lot of games left. But the funny thing is Montreal's got what? They got 6 games left? 7 games left? Do you have it in front of you? I don't have it in front of me. 6 games left?
6 after tonight.
Yeah, 4 of them are at
7
home.
included tonight, yeah.
And 5 of them are at home. So they only have, I think, 1 or 2 road games left. That's it. But tonight, and then you have DC United on Saturday for Montreal with, of course, without Wayne Rooney, who has been suspended for 2 games because of his red card 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago. So Montreal's going to face a Rooney-less DC United, which we could pretty much say that DC United over the last 3 weeks were pretty much Rooney-less. But for the Impact, they have a chance. They need those 2 games, 2 wins, 6 points. It's 6 points over the next 2 games at home or bust. It's now or never for 2019.
That's for Kevin's stinging podcast coming up. Yeah, no, if you get 0 points out of the next 2 games, just turn off the lights.
Yeah, wow.
But you need to get 6. So they have 2 bad teams coming in. One team on bad form that is above you in the standings and falling like a rock, and one team that's just bad. And you're both at home. You need, even 4 points is too few in my mind. I think you need 2 wins.
You need
to stay in the race.
You need 2 wins, of course. And let's look at the standings before tonight's game in the Eastern Conference to see what we're talking about. Montreal, with a win tonight, would equal Toronto in points, but Montreal will have 2 games played more than Toronto. And Montreal's differential is terrible, one of the worst in the Eastern Conference, with minus 12. 12. So disregard the differential if it comes to the second. Is it a second or third tiebreaker?
It goes wins, then goal differential.
So it's a second tiebreaker. So if Montreal needs to win, but that's where they're actually might be in good position. Montreal has not a lot of draws, which was the case under Remy Gall. For some reason, he won or he lost. Montreal only has 4 draws this year, 14 losses, but 10 wins. So with those 10 wins, they're equal on win as of right now, with DC United, New England, and Toronto. Montreal, with the win tonight, of course, they have more games played than all the other teams except DC, and they would have the exact same amount of games played than DC. They would have, 2 points less, but they win more. So eventually, if they become tied on points, and it is between those two, Montreal could have the tiebreaker on DC. Maybe on New England and maybe even on Toronto, because they're all at 10 wins right now. So Montreal needs to make sure it doesn't go to the second tiebreaker. Montreal needs a win. Montreal needs 2 wins. And if they do so, at least they can consider the fact that they have maybe the first tiebreaker on maybe 3 opponents in the playoff race.
2 games, 2 big losses by the Impact this year are looming heavy over their season. That 7-1 loss against KC, and I'm actually forgetting the other one, but there was another, was it 5-goal
5-1 Colorado. 6-3 Colorado, sorry.
Yeah, so you get a couple losses like that, particularly that 7-1 to allow 6 goals in MLS the goal differential thing is not good. So that's a big issue for Montreal right now.
Yep, it is. It is. But on that note, we'll keep an eye on the Montreal Ball. I'll be there. I'll be there tonight, Montreal and Vancouver. You can follow my Twitter at 24th Minute. That's Duane. But you can follow myself at Kev Laramee with my coverage of the game tonight. The Montreal Impact hosting the Vancouver Whitecaps, and the return home of Mark Dos Santos as manager of the Whitecaps will be fascinating. Thanks again to everyone for listening. But before we say goodbye, Duane, we wanted to promote yesterday's show. We had Joe Bellin, a former Canadian Youth International investment banker over the last 20 years, on the show on the Two Soccer podcast, which you can get subscription to for $2 a month at patreon.com/sportspodcasting network. A great 20-minute interview on soccer in Saskatchewan, the summer soccer series in Saskatchewan, and also the Canadian Premier League, the challenges, and also the positive and the efforts that are being made right now to bring a Canadian Premier League team to Saskatoon for probably 2021. If you want to have more details, make sure you go to patreon.com/sportspodcasting network. Duane.
Exactly, and I'm not ready to announce it yet, but the guest for next week's Two Solitudes will actually be someone that Canadian soccer fans will be very well aware of. There also will be the word international in his title when we introduce him. So we'll confirm that a little later on in the week. We'll firm it up, but it looks pretty good right now. And $2 or more a month for all those great interviews. So that are all consistently making threads on Reddit right now. Every Two Solitudes we do, it pops up on Reddit, which tells you we're making news.
We're newsworthy. Woohoo! We're so cool. We're on Reddit. Oh yeah. And on that note, I'm not going to mute my mic if I'm talking. I'm going to mute Duane's. On that note, you can follow Duane at 24th Minute, myself at Kev Laramee, and this show at Soccer Today SPN Live, Monday to Friday, usually 11 a.m., sometimes like today, a bit later because life does get in the way, but never too much for us to not talk about soccer. We'll keep an eye on the game tonight and come back tomorrow to talk about the world of football with a soccer perspective. As always, thank you for your subscription, for your trust, and for your financial support over the years. And until tomorrow, have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.